Welcome to If Numbers Could Talk. My name is KEILYN. If Numbers Could Talk is a part of the Thinkering group. You can find us over at thinkering.space. You can also find at Thinkering Space the Thinkering Talks podcast, the Exofathom podcast, along with the Plank Talks with Joe. When you get a chance, please check out our merchandise. We have merchandise on our website, thinkering.space, as well as merchandise at teespring.com/thinkering shop. Please visit, grab a t-shirt, grab a mug. We'll appreciate it. And when you do, feel free to let us know that you've decided to become a member of any of our fan clubs. Welcome to If Numbers Could Talk this evening. I appreciate you all for being here. One of the most important things that I would personally like to say at the top of this episode is thank you for tuning in. Happy New Year for those who didn't catch me, my first episode of the year. And let's dive right into it. Today, we are going to be talking about the highs and lows of your sports pros. What that means is we're going to be talking about the highest contracts, the lowest contracts, the rookie contracts, and even the commissioner contracts of professional sports. I'll also go over what it really means to get a contract of this nature. The first thing we all know is when you make more money, you enter a different tax bracket. So these contracts are not the value of what these people are taking home. It is the value of what they are signing to make for the year and or the duration of the contract spoken. So let's ballpark the numbers that are spoken. These individuals are probably taking home about 40 to 60%. They are losing about 40 to 60%, depending on the athlete, depending on the sport and the country, as well as the province, say it be a state and or even a county, perhaps. Some of those things will change. Another thing that we will discuss in short is collective bargaining agreements, CBAs. What year did these leagues have their first CBA? Welcome to If Numbers Could Talk. My name is KEILYN. So let's dive right on into it. We're going to begin with every sport that I'm going to go over. Some sports don't have all of the same statistics or some of the same information. So there are some things that let's call them redacted. There are some things that won't be available to speak on. However, the first thing I'm going to go over is when each of these leagues were inducted. When did they become created? When were they official, so to speak? So the NBA is going to be one of our leagues today. The NBA was created in 1946. The WNBA was created in 1996. The MLB was created in 1903. The NFL, 1920. The MLS, 1993. The NHL, 1917. And the PGA, 1929. Now, for those who don't know what these acronyms are, allow me to help. National Basketball Association, Women's National Basketball Association, Major League Baseball, National Football League, Major League Soccer, National Hockey League, and I honestly believe is the Private Golf Association, but I just realized I do not know what the P in PGA stands for. One of the beautiful things about this is not one of those episodes where we're pitting anyone or anything against anything. We are simply going to discover a few things. We're going to find out how, why, and when, right? For the most part, when you put some of these things together, that's all we're getting to. How, why, and when. The first how is, how did they come to be? How did they begin? The why would be the collective bargaining agreement. So when did that start? When did that get instituted? A collective bargaining agreement is an agreement between an association and its players, or its players association, so to speak. and it states how the employees are going to be treated. It states what the employees demand of the people they work for. And for most people with contracted jobs, they understand that that is something that when you get to a certain level of tenure, or you have a certain level of influence in your job, you can pretty much say, hey, this is what I would like in my contract, or this is there are some stipulations I don't like. What can we amend this with? And that's really what the collective bargaining agreement is. The association and the players association, not the league and just to the players. There is an entire committee that speaks for the players, that is empowered by the players, and that is who the collective bargaining agreement is made between. So those are the things we're going to go over. And I also tried to find out something that I thought was pretty interesting. When did these leagues have their first $1 million contract? That I thought was that was the sweet tea for me. So let's start up with contract average. What on average does an athlete make in these respective leagues? Well, in the NBA, the average contract, when you put them all together and you break them down, the average contract comes up to about $10 million. Now, again, remember, I will say again, as we begin going through the actual numbers, this is about consider this a gross income. This is not what these people are taking home. This is what is on paper. Once you go through taxes and a whole bunch of other things, believe me, they're losing somewhere between 40 to 60%, as most people do when they get to a different tax bracket. Now, if you have a really good accountant, who knows, right? We've all heard some stories, especially as of recently, of how some people have gotten around taxes. I'm not speaking for that. I don't know. What I do know is, on average, most of these people in these tax brackets are losing, from what I've heard, because I'm not in their tax bracket, about 40 to 60% based on tax stipulations and those types of things. Still, they make incredible amounts of money. So NBA, average contract, $10 million from what my research was able to find. The WNBA average contract, $100,000 from what my research was able to find. That is a little weird to me, considering what the highest and the lowest is, but it says on average, a WNBA player can bring in about $100,000 from the WNBA a year. The MLB, $4 million average per contract. And remember, when we say on average, we're collecting everybody and what they make, and we're breaking it down based on that. The NFL, $860,000 is the average contract. The average. I thought that was incredible, considering, and I will state this now, the highest contract in history, the highest paid, or excuse me, the highest written contract on paper in history is in the NFL. So to find out that the average contract ballparks for about $860,000. Now, when you understand also how many players are on that NFL team and the fact that a good portion of those guys never even see the field, I get it. But these are contracts that these guys are signed under. For the Major League Soccer, the MLS, the average contract I was able to find comes up to about $179,000. Also, keep in mind, the MLS is fairly new. A lot of people wouldn't think that. You just think soccer, but the MLS, Major League Soccer, which is here in North America, the average pay is only about $179,000 per contract when collected. The NHL, $3 million. And the PGA, $2 million, with a question, because once again, that average is really rough. That's a rough average when you consider there are guys who come in making about $19,000 per tournament if they don't really place or do anything. And then you have guys who can make about $4 or $5 million per tour or per event. That makes it a little different, especially considering that is how golf works. Golf works more so by event than year. You might only do 2 or 3 events, and that's your year. And someone can make more than you in one event if they are ranked high enough. Golf is a pretty interesting game when I tried to follow it a little. Now, again, these numbers are rough. These are all rough numbers. I could have been a little more specific with my research and I found very specific numbers, but rather than give you 4.79 and all that good stuff, I rounded most of the numbers to give a rough estimate of what to gauge, what the range is in all of these sports. And that's what we're looking for. What is the range? Now let's go straight to the highest, from the average to the highest, before we get to lowest, rookies, or any of that. From the average to the highest paid NBA contract right now in 1 year, a player makes $43 million. Another thing that will not be happening in this episode is we will not be naming names of who makes this money. We're not counting anyone's pockets. We're simply getting a gauge as to what our professional athletes make. So in the NBA, the highest paid contract is $43 million in 1 year. In the WNBA, the highest paid contract is $127,000 per year. In the MLB, the highest paid contract is currently $37 million per year. In the NFL, it's going to get a little different, and I'll explain. In the NFL, the current highest paid contract to right now, the guy getting paid the most, is getting paid $35 million. However, on contract, on paper, the guy that is slated to make the largest amount of money in NFL history per year is $45 million, an entire $10 million more. However, that guy will not be making $45 million until the year 2022, or the season of 2022. So currently, the NFL highest paid player is $35 million in 1 year. In the MLS, the highest paid player is, the highest paid contract is $7 million per year. In the NHL, $12 million is the highest paid contract per year. And in the PGA, the highest paid, let's call that we won't call that a contract, the highest paid total, the highest payout was $4 million to one golf athlete. Now, when we go from the highest, coming straight from the average is like, wow, if guys are being average ballpark, again, we'll go just to the MLS, Major League Soccer. The average is only $179,000, but the highest paid player is making $7 million. Something I noticed when looking at that list, the next guy behind him, I think, is making around $4 million, $3 million. So there's one or two players that really got that jump, and everyone else is making $3 million or less. And that's why the average is so low, because everyone's not making these huge sums. We know what the top players are making on average in any sport. We only really know, or we only really hear about what your top 10 athletes are making. So we know what your bigger names are making. The guys that are in your all-star games, that are on your billboards, that are in your commercials, we know what their contracts look like. What does the 12th man's contract look like, right? What does the rookie's contract, not the first round pick, which we'll get there. So the lowest contract in the NBA, we're going to get to the lowest contracts, the lowest paid contracts in professional sports today. The lowest paid contract in the NBA is $898,000. The lowest paid contract in the WNBA is $57,000. Note I have the NBA water boy salary is located somewhere around $58,000. The lowest paid WNBA player makes $57,000. Remember, we're comparing salaries here. In the MLB, the lowest paid salary in Major League Baseball is $563,000. The lowest paid salary in the NFL is $378,000. While the lowest paid salary in the MLS, now remember the average, we were talking about averages, we went to highs, and now we're at lows. The lowest paid salary in the Major League Soccer is $63,000. The lowest paid salary in the NHL, National Hockey League, is $700,000. And the lowest paid total for a golfing tournament for a professional is $19,000. Another note I made there was a gentleman who finished last in a golfing tournament and was only paid $3,000 for his exit. Now, I say that, and I have the notes that I have that I will be interjecting with as I'm reading these numbers off, simply to note that A lot of these things do change. A lot of these, again, are ballpark rough numbers. I have not sat down with anyone and looked at any of these contracts. What I know is what has been reported to multiple sites on Google. What I know, what has been reported by these leagues themselves, and or what has been listed in other places. And I have taken the time to try to find the most efficient numbers that are out there. So the next thing we have is rookies. Rookies. What does a rookie make? Now, a couple of things I did find is what does some of our number one picks make, right? But what does the average rookie make? Well, let's start with what seems to be everybody's favorite when it comes to draft time, the NBA. The NBA draft, the number one draft pick can ballpark about $8 million their first season. Now, I don't think I've ever seen that on paper from what I am aware of. But again, I've never seen every single number one draft pick's contract. I've never really looked for every number one draft pick's contract. However, from what my research found, the number one draft pick, as of now, can make about $8 million in his very first year. Now, the average rookie in the NBA, however, makes about $898,000, which is the lowest. That is the minimum. So once a rookie comes in, they get everything going. On average, they're going to come in making the league minimum, which is $898,000. The WNBA rookie average is $68,000. The MLB rookie average is currently $563,000. However, in 2019, it was only $8,500. So $8,500 in 2019 was the rookie average. But that has been raised this year, as of the 2020 season, up to $563,000. Okay, MLB, I see what you're doing there. And again, that's where these collective bargaining agreements come in. That's why when you watch particular sports, you may remember, depending on how old you are, how long you've actually been watching certain sports, you may remember some lockouts in your favorite sport. You may remember there were shorter seasons because players were holding out. It's because sometimes those collective bargaining agreements are not satisfactory to what they're looking for or to what they've agreed to amongst themselves. And that's what they'll be waiting on, is for the league to amend and adhere to what their demands are. And that's what they will be at that point. Their demands, and that's why they're holding out. The NFL average rookie makes $610,000. Major League Soccer. In Major League Soccer, they have an age gap for the rookies. So a rookie under 25 makes $36,000, but a rookie over 25 makes $48,000 a year. Again, in the MLS, there is an age for rookie salaries. So a rookie under the age of 25 makes $36,000, and a rookie over the age of 25 makes $48,000. Now, let me go back. Also, in Major League Baseball, there are some age stipulations, but there's also multiple minor leagues, as they are called, that come for some guys before they make it to the majors. So I only wanted to focus on when you make that first move. On average, there's not a lot of 18 and 19-year-old guys making it to the majors straight away. From my research, I thought about it and I really had to look it up. It wasn't something that I really knew off the top of my head. So I looked it up and I wasn't able to find many, if I'm being honest. And the other thing is for the NHL. The NHL rookies make $925,000 on average. Now, for the PGA, I was not able to find what the average rookie makes, remembering and keeping in mind that to finish last in the average PGA Tour match or event, you'll go home with about $19,000. So I figured that would be about the baseline for a newcomer, But I'm not quite sure. That might be a little different. If anyone has any information on that, please let me know. I'm very eager to learn more about that. Maybe call it age. Maybe it's as I get older, I'll become more interested in golf, right? But definitely was interested in that. Excuse me. So from there, let's get to the collective bargaining agreements. And from collective bargaining agreements, we'll go into two other things that I really, really liked, and then some things that I think are very good to know, rattling off these numbers, talking about these numbers and how the players get down, what the players make. And then we'll get to where that money comes from. Collective bargaining agreements. The NBA had their first collective bargaining agreement signed in 1957. The first discussion was 1955. Apparently, it did not get solidified until 1957 when the players sat out and there was a lockout. I even know the player that started that, but that's not for this episode. The WNBA, while having a CBA, seemingly had a CBA from conception, because there was no note of when their first CBA began versus just their inception altogether. The Major League Baseball, MLB, their first CBA was formed in 1968. 1968. The NFL's first CBA also was signed in 1968. Major League Soccer had their first collective bargaining agreement signed, apparently, or at least the first change, let's call it that, the first edit to their collective bargaining agreement was 2005. The NHL, their first collective bargaining agreement came into play in 1994, where the PGA does not have a collective bargaining agreement, and I don't think they would need one considering how they run business as far as the golfers in their events. I think it works a lot more like NASCAR, but again, I'm learning more about golf as we go. I actually didn't think golf would be considered in this, but it just continuously came up in my research, and I felt compelled to add it. So much so, I think there might be a few episodes in the future that are golf oriented. So for all you golf fans, look forward. Now, the highest contract in history. The highest contract in history. In fact, before we get to the highest contract in history, got you all excited for that, right? But instead, let's do the first $1 million contract. In what year did these leagues have their first $1 million contract? Well, let's discuss it. It was in 1979. The NBA had their first $1 million signing. 1979, also the MLB had their first $1 million signing. And this is per year, not per just $1 million for the next 5-6 years. No, just 1 year in that particular year, any particular year, you were going to make $1 million in that contract. In the WNBA, they have yet to reach the goal of someone making $1 million a year. In the NFL, it was 1980 when the first player made $1 million. In the MLS, they have yet to have it where it is noted that there was this, a guy nobody was making that before, and now people are making $1 million or more. I believe that guys were already making that from the inception again of the MLS, of Major League Soccer. In 1971, the NHL had their first $1 million player signing. And again, the PGA is a little different. It's not a big thing for them. They've had multiple pots or prizes that exceeded $1 million very early. Now, getting from there, we're going to go straight into the highest historical contract signed. Please excuse. So it was the NBA that has the highest contract for $257 million has been signed. That is the highest contract in NBA history. That does not mean that is the most money made in NBA history. That does not mean that is the highest per year. Actually, I think that is the highest per year now. But what it is saying is, for a contract, not per year, the entire contract value was $257. No player has ever had a contract that was valued at $257 until now. The WNBA highest valued contract, again, one of those findings that was a little off-putting. It was confusing, seeing as how the highest salary is $127,000 in a year, but it also said that the highest historical contract altogether was only $127. So I'm assuming that the base of this contract at making $127 per year, say over a 4-year period, this would be the highest contract in WNBA history. The highest historical contract for the MLB, the highest historical contract for the MLB. Now, There was a $426 million signing about 2 years ago. However, what I found listed was a $330 million contract. That is the largest contract to date. But again, I am aware that there was a $426 million contract signed. However, when you go and look it up, it's going to tell you that it was a $330 million contract. I'm going to skip over the NFL, go to the next ones, and then I'll get back there. Major League Soccer has yet to have a historic contract. I'd say the closest would be the David Beckham signing, which was around $200 million. The NHL has the historical high of $124 million for one contract, and the PGA has their historic high of the most money made by a PGA player or a golfer, $120 million to date. Now, the NFL, again, has the highest historical contract of all time, listed at $503 million. $503 million. Now, I say all of that, we encompass all of these numbers, year by year numbers, full contract numbers, and we all keep in mind, a lot of these numbers are only met through incentives, sometimes through endorsements, and a lot of other stipulations that, I mean, you can't really guarantee they're going to happen. So you can't guarantee the money's going to be there. What you know is it is possible to make this money. So the gentleman who has a $503 million contract, he might only be guaranteed $400 million. But to make that extra $103 million over the duration, there's things he can do to make that next $103 million and get a total of $503 million. And that is how most of these contracts really work. So you'll see on paper you're making $10 million, but you're making $10 million if you have this percentage, you played this amount of minutes, you made this on this night, you had this at home, you had this on the road, you made this accolade, and then you're going to get your $10 million. Before you have those accolades, your contract might really be about $6 million. Yeah. So that's before taxes and all of those things. And these are just things that we don't know or think about as the average fan or consumer. And because of that, I also took the time to find the salary, the yearly salary of each of these leagues' commissioners. The commissioner of each of these leagues. I did a little homework to find the salary of the commissioners. So for all of those who are only watching for the beginning portion to find out about your favorite player, you missed out a little bit, but you'll come back, and I appreciate you. And for all of those who are still here watching with me, go ahead and tap your friends, send them a message, and let them know, hey, wait, he's giving the commissioners contracts, which is not something that is typically done. I'm not sure why. I think it's interesting to know what the commissioner of some leagues make versus what some of these players make. Let's find out if you think it's interesting as well. So in the NBA, the commissioner, and I'll also be telling you when the commissioner came into power. When did the commissioner become the commissioner? In the NBA, the commissioner makes $10 million a year on contract, and this commissioner came in 2014. All commissioners will begin to make more money from their first year to their final year. There are commissioners that are in for 10 years. Some commissioners are in for 20 plus years. Because of that, a guy might be making $10 million on his sixth year, but by his 10th year, he'll probably be making somewhere around $17 million. And it'll just keep rising. And the more the league makes, of course, the more the commissioner is going to make. You better put it in your contracts. Now, remember, these are the contracts that are signed through the associations. That does not mean that they don't get endorsements. These commissioners are getting contracts through the people they work for, right? That doesn't mean they don't get endorsements. Some of them, I'm sure, have endorsements and other ties and other business things going on. So again, the NBA commissioner, $10 million, and he started his job in 2014. $10 million a year for the NBA commissioner. The WNBA commissioner, that information was a little harder to find, of course. I could not really find the year she became the commissioner. However, it says that her base salary is $130,000, which is the same thing that they had made and changed with the new collective bargaining agreement for the WNBA. the base salary, the minimum salary of a WNBA player is supposed to be rising to somewhere around $130,000. I think that's awesome. But the commissioner, her salary is also listed somewhere around that. Doesn't mean that's what she's worth. That's what she's listed at as far as making from the WNBA. In the MLB, the commissioner makes $11 million a year and began his job in 2015. In the NFL, now the NFL commissioner's job seemingly is also one of those incentive-based jobs. So the commissioner of the NFL on contract makes about $4 to $5 million a year guaranteed. That person started their job in 2006. However, based on incentives, they can ballpark somewhere between $40 and $50 million per year based on incentives, which would basically be the performance of the league that they are over. Major League Soccer, the commissioner is making about $5 million on average a year and began his job in 1999, also an incentive-based job according to my research. The NHL commissioner makes yearly $9.6 million and began that job in 1993, the current commissioner. While the PGA commissioner, who began their job in 2017, makes on average $3.9 million per year. $3.9 million per year. Now, once we know what the players make on average, we know the highest contract that is currently in existence, the lowest contracts, and some of the history behind those contracts, collective bargaining agreements. What did your commissioner make this year? Even when did the first $1 million contract? Now, as you see now, most of these guys are making what the average or the best players were making back in the beginning, of course, of their sports, and or maybe even 15 years ago. But what is the league making? What does league revenue look like? Now, the league doesn't have to worry about what they're taking home. The league gets taxed a certain way, of course, but they don't get taxed like an employee, right? So let's ballpark it. I did a little homework to find out what is the ballpark on average per year. What do these leagues bring in? What is their revenue? What is the revenue of these leagues? Average, right? I thought it was interesting only because the numbers scale on it's a roller coaster. There is no straight line here. Allow me to help you understand a little. And we're all up there for the record. Everything's pretty high, but it's not a straight line. The NBA on average per year, per season has $8 billion in revenue. $8 billion in revenue. That is only generated funds. Now, I want to say that again. These are generated revenue funds. $8 billion on average for the NBA. $60 million on average for the WNBA. $9 billion on average for the MLB. $15 billion on average for the NFL. $7 billion on average for the MLS. $5 billion on average for the NHL. And $1 billion on average for the PGA Tour or PGA in general. And again, I believe the PGA is kind of like a a contractor type of a deal. But again, the average league, the average professional league here in North America is making 8, 9, 15, 7, $5 billion of revenue per year. Now, I'm not sure where all that money's going. I'm not here to speculate on that. I'm not here to say who's putting it in their pockets because, again, I'm not giving you any names. You want to find names, you go do your own homework. I am only giving you the scale that I was able to find to show what our professional sports athletes are making, what the commissioners of those professional sports are making, and what those leagues themselves on average are kind of bringing in to generate those kind of salaries, to generate those funds and that revenue. If there's anything you guys would like to hear more about when it comes to this topic, please let me know. I will definitely do some research and dig into that for you. You could definitely send me a message over at ifnumberscouldstalk@gmail.com. Please visit us over at thinkering.space. Visit our Facebooks, YouTube, Thinkering Talks at Facebook, Exofathom Podcast, Facebook and Instagram. If Numbers Could Talk, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Sorry, Exofathom also over at YouTube. We have merch shops. Check it all out for us. Let us know what you think. Go ahead and by all means, if you don't like it, tell us you don't like it so we know what to put out there. We know what we're working with here. My favorite thing is to simply give. I love to give information. I love to just help people figure this thing out, because a lot of times we're having discussions and we get in our emotions, but we don't really know where to go with it. But let's be honest. You've heard people say things and you were like, wait, that doesn't sound right. You know what? I'm going to Google it. I don't agree. And then you found the numbers or the information. And that's my purpose here is I simply like to give information, and this kind of stuff is, these are the things that we're always discussing in our circles. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Visit us, join us, take care of yourself, take care of those you love. And by all means, when you're watching your favorite professional sports, keep in mind that everybody's not making what your favorite player's making. Everybody's not making what we're told those few people are making. There are some people who are making a lot less than some of the people who are working everyday jobs. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great one. And for those who managed to stick around for a while, I just wanted to add something at the end here for you. Coming up soon, we'll be having a few live guests on. Looking forward to it. Hope you guys are too. Appreciate you guys. Later.